Jungkook sat on the edge of the guest room's bed, his phone pressed to his ear, the familiar ringtone a fragile thread connecting him to the life he'd left behind. The estate's opulence felt suffocating after Taehyung's fleeting touch in the dining room, his fingers brushing Jungkook's cheek, his voice calling him a risk, and Jungkook needed the grounding warmth of his family's voices. The leak, Yoongi's threats, and Taehyung's world were closing in, and he wasn't sure how much longer he could carry it all. Junghyun picked up on the third ring, his voice bright but tinged with worry. "Hyung, you're alive. I was starting to think you got kidnapped by aliens or something." Jungkook let out a shaky laugh, leaning back against the headboard. "No aliens, just work stuff." "How's mom?" "She's okay," Junghyun said, his tone softening. "Had a checkup today. Doctors say she's responding to the new meds. She keeps asking about you, though. Says you sound weird on the phone." Jungkook's chest tightened, guilt gnawing at him. He hadn't told them about the surrogacy, the estate, or the danger circling him like a predator. "I'm fine," he said, the lie heavy on his tongue. "Just busy. Tell her I'll visit soon, okay?" Junghyun was quiet for a moment, his perceptiveness cutting through the distance. "You're not fine, Hyung. I know you. What's going on? Is it that rich guy you're working for?" Jungkook's breath caught, the image of Taehyung's intense eyes flashing in his mind. "It's complicated," he said, his voice quieter. "He's not what I expected. But I'm handling it. Better be," Junghyun said, his tone half teasing, half serious. "If he's messing with you, I'll come punch him. Billionaire or not." Jungkook smiled, the threat warming his heart despite its absurdity. "Deal." "Love you, brat." "Love you too," Junghyun said, then added, "Don't disappear, okay?" As the call ended, Jungkook set the phone down, the silence of the room pressing in. He was doing this for them, his mother's health, Junghyun's future, but every day in Taehyung's world made him feel further from the person he used to be. A knock at the door snapped him out of his thoughts. Ms. Lee's voice came through, calm and efficient. "Mr. Jian. Mr. Kim requests your presence in the security room. The briefing starts in 10 minutes, Jungkook sighed, pulling himself together and heading to the now familiar security wing. The room was already buzzing when he arrived, monitors glowing with data and surveillance feeds. Taehyung stood at the head of a small table, flanked by Jimin and two other security personnel, his dark suit sharp against the room's sterile backdrop. His eyes flicked to Jungkook as he entered, a brief but piercing glance that sent a shiver down Jungkook's spine. "Sit," Taehyung said, his voice commanding but softer than usual, gesturing to a chair near him. Jungkook obeyed, his hands clasped tightly in his lap, hyper-aware of Taehyung's proximity. Jimin tapped his tablet, pulling up a map of Incheon with a red pin marking a location. "Hana Kim gave us names," he said, his voice brisk. "Siak Jin's running point for Yoongi's operation. They're holed up in a warehouse here, planning to leak more details unless we back off. We're prepping a team to intercept." Taehyung's expression was unreadable, but his fingers drummed lightly on the table, a subtle sign of the storm beneath his calm. "Do it quietly," he said, his voice low, final. "No loose ends. And make it clear, anyone who comes for us doesn't walk away." Jungkook's stomach twisted, the ruthlessness in Taehyung's tone a stark reminder of the man who ruled an empire. But when Taehyung's gaze shifted to him, it softened, a flicker of something protective, almost tender. That made Jungkook's heart race. Mr. Jian needs to be briefed on personal security, Jimin said, glancing at Jungkook. If Yoongi's people escalate, he is the primary target. Jungkook stiffened, the weight of being a target sinking in. What do I need to do? He asked, his voice steadier than he felt. Taehyung leaned forward, his eyes locking onto Jungkook's with an intensity that drowned out the room. You stay with me, he said, his voice low, meant for Jungkook alone. No exceptions. My team handles the rest. Jungkook's jaw tightened, a mix of frustration and warmth swirling in his chest. I'm not helpless, he said, his voice quiet but firm. I can handle more than you think. Taehyung's lips twitched, a faint, almost smile that sent a jolt through Jungkook. I know, he said, his voice softer now, almost proud. But you're not doing this alone. Not anymore. The words hung between them, heavy with meaning. Jimin cleared his throat, breaking the moment, and the briefing continued, but Jungkook's focus stayed on Taehyung. The way his hand rested close to Jungkook's on the table, the way his eyes flicked to him every few seconds. The billionaire's protectiveness was a shield, but it was also a claim, and Jungkook wasn't sure if he wanted to fight it or lean into it. As the meeting ended and the team dispersed, Taehyung lingered, his gaze pinning Jungkook in place. You're quiet, he said, his voice low, searching. What's on your mind? Jungkook hesitated, then met Taehyung's eyes, his heart pounding. My family, he said softly. I just talked to them. They're worried, and I hate lying to them. But I'm here, doing this, because of you. Because of what you're fighting for. Taehyung's expression softened, a ray of vulnerability flickering in his eyes. You're fighting for them, he said, his voice quiet but firm. And I'm fighting for you. He stepped closer, his hand brushing Jungkook's arm, the touch light but electric. Don't carry it alone, Jian. Let me take some of the weight. Jungkook's breath hitched, the warmth of Taehyung's touch grounding him in the chaos. For a moment, he wanted to close the distance, to let Taehyung's strength anchor him, but the billionaire stepped back, his expression closing off. Stay close, Taehyung said, his tone reverting to command. We're not through this yet. As Taehyung left, Jungkook stood frozen, his heart still racing. Taehyung's words, I'm fighting for you, were a vow, a promise that bound them tighter than any contract. He was in the heart of the storm now, and as the estate's walls closed around him, Jungkook knew he was choosing to stay, not just for his family, but for the man who was becoming more than his protector. The estate felt like a gilded cage as Jungkook paced the guest room, the ticking clock on the nightstand marking the hour since Taehyung had left for Incheon. The security briefing's plan, intercepting Seojin at the warehouse, had left Jungkook on edge, his imagination running wild with images of danger and betrayal. Taehyung's promise, I'm fighting for you, was a lifeline, but the billionaire's secrecy and the looming threat of Yoongi's network made it hard to hold on to. He'd tried distracting himself with a book from the estate's library, but the words blurred, his thoughts circling back to Taehyung's touch in the security room, the warmth of his hand on Jungkook's arm. The connection between them was growing, a fragile thread woven through tension and trust, but Jungkook wasn't sure if it could withstand the storm they were in. A sharp knock at the door startled him, and Ms. Lee's voice came through, clipped but urgent. Mr. Jian. Mr. Kim has returned. He's in the study and requests your presence. Jungkook's heart leaped, a mix of relief and apprehension flooding him. He followed Miss Lee through the estate's quiet halls, the weight of the unknown pressing down. When he reached the study, the door was ajar, and Taehyung stood by the fireplace, his dark coat discarded on a chair, his shirt sleeves rolled up to reveal toned forearms. The firelight cast shadows across his face, highlighting the exhaustion in his eyes and a faint bruise along his jaw, a mark that made Jungkook's stomach twist. "You're hurt," Jungkook said, his voice soft but sharp as he stepped inside, closing the door behind him. Taehyung glanced at him, his expression guarded but softening at Jungkook's concern. "It's nothing," he said, his voice low, rough from fatigue. A scuffle. Seokjin's men didn't go quietly. Jungkook's hands clenched at his sides, his eyes fixed on the bruise. "What happened?" he asked, his voice trembling with a mix of worry and frustration. "You said you'd keep me safe, but you're out there getting hurt. Why didn't you tell me you were going yourself?" Taehyung's jaw tightened, and he turned fully to face Jungkook, his gaze piercing. "Because it's my fight," he said, his voice firm but laced with something raw. "I needed to end this, Seokjin, the leak, all of it. For you. For us." Jungkook's breath caught, the weight of Taehyung's words sinking in. "Us," he echoed, his voice barely above a whisper. "You keep saying things like that, but you're still shutting me out. I'm not just a bystander, Taehyung. I'm in this too." Taehyung stepped closer, the space between them shrinking until Jungkook could feel the heat radiating from him, the faint scent of smoke clinging to his shirt. "You're not a bystander," Taehyung said, his voice low, intense. "You're the reason I'm fighting harder than I ever have. You're—" He paused, his eyes flickering with a storm of emotions, fear, longing, resolve. "You're everything I didn't know I needed," the confession stole Jungkook's breath, the air between them crackling with unspoken truth. Taehyung's closeness was overwhelming, his bruised jaw a reminder of the risks he'd taken, and Jungkook's resolve wavered. "You can't keep doing this," he said, his voice trembling. "Risking yourself, keeping secrets. I'm scared, Taehyung. For you. For whatever this is." Taehyung's expression softened, and he reached out, his hand cupping Jungkook's cheek, his thumb brushing gently over his skin. The touch was tender, grounding, and Jungkook leaned into it despite himself, his heart racing. "I'm scared too," Taehyung admitted, his voice raw, barely audible. "I've never had something worth losing. Until you." Jungkook's eyes widened, the vulnerability in Taehyung's voice stripping away the billionaire's walls. He wanted to speak, to ask what it meant, but Taehyung's hand slid to the back of his neck, pulling him closer until their foreheads touched, their breaths mingling in the firelit silence. The moment was fragile, electric, and Jungkook felt the world narrow to Taehyung's warmth, his steady presence. "I need you to trust me," Taehyung whispered, his voice a plea and a promise. "Even when it's hard." "Can you do that?" Jungkook nodded, his throat tight, his hands lifting to rest on Taehyung's chest, feeling the steady beat of his heart. "I'm trying," he said softly. "But you have to let me in." "No more walls." Taehyung's lips curved, a faint, bittersweet smile. "No more walls," he echoed, his voice low. "For you, I'll try." The moment stretched, their closeness a heartbeat away from something more, but a sharp buzz from Taehyung's phone broke the spell. He pulled back, his expression hardening as he glanced at the screen. "Jimin," he said, his voice reverting to command. "The warehouse is secure, but Seokjin's still out there. This isn't over." Jungkook's heart sank, the reality of the threat crashing back. "What now?" he asked, his voice steadier than he felt. Taehyung's gaze returned to him, fierce and protective. "Now, you stay close," he said, his hand lingering on Jungkook's arm for a moment before falling away. "And we fight this together." As Taehyung moved to answer the call, Jungkook stood by the fire, his heart still pounding. Taehyung's confession, "You're everything I didn't know I needed," was a vow that bound them tighter than any contract. He was in the heart of the storm now, choosing to stand beside a man who was both his shield and his enigma. And as the fire crackled, Jungkook knew one thing for certain: he wasn't running, no matter what came next.